Hello and welcome back to the How to Be Good podcast, the show where we talk to people and businesses that are looking to combat climate change and live a more sustainable life. Today's guest, we were both so excited about. He is an Academy Award winner. He's directed films like The Cove, Racing Extinction and Game Changers, as well as doing many other things. He's also one of the top 10 photographers by Fortune magazine, I think said that he was, which I've seen some of his work. I had a good look on his website and they are stunning and really good. And he's also the CEO of the Oceanic Preservation Society, so he's done quite a bit.
He has indeed, and he's the man that changed our lives. Really.
He is.
We watched Racing Extinction initially, and as one of his first documentaries, and that was the documentary that made us decide that we need to go on a more sustainable path, and we need to find a way to live in balance with the world around us. So. Thank you, Louie. We are looking forward to showing you the rest of the interview.
Today we are with Louie Psihoyos. How are you?
Really good. Thank you.
It's so exciting to have you on the show, and thank you very much for agreeing to be here. We really wanted to talk about, and we will talk about, the documentaries. But before that, could you tell us a little bit about, I guess, your journey and how you ended up doing what you're doing and being where you are?
Oh, well, yeah, I had an interest in photography from a pretty early age. And I love photography. I was a newspaper delivery boy, and I happened to be in the town of a world-class photography staff at the local newspaper, but I was just a kid delivering the papers. So when we go down on Sunday morning at 5 a.m, you look at the pictures, and I was always blown away and thinking that would be an interesting life to be a photographer. And then, when I was, about 14 years old, I was taking a photography class in high school, and one of the photographers from that staff came to talk to our class, and I just thought, my God, this is what he does for a living. That the switch went off, and I started winning contests like Kodak, film.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you say this stuff. The Kodak film doesn't even exist anymore, right? The Kodachrome. But back when used to take pictures with film, I won an international contest, or the national contest called, that was sponsored by Kodak. I got an internship at the local newspaper. I started working with those people that I was looking up to when I was a paper boy. And, I was a working photographer when I was age 15, and I had this unique opportunity. And I always wanted to be a National Geographic photographer. That was the fantasy. When I was a kid, you either wanted to, there's two jobs you wanted. You wanted to either be an astronaut or a photographer for National Geographic. Yeah. The problem was that there was more turnover as an astronaut than there was as a National Geographic photographer. And I'd won a contest when I was in college called College Photographer of the Year. It was an international contest. Mm-hmm. And the winner of that, I'll say that I applied for an internship back when I was a junior in college. And the director of photography, Robert Gilka, wrote back from National Geographic and said, internships are only for people that aren't good enough to be a photographer yet. You're good enough. Good luck. Oh shit! But the winner of that contest got to have an internship at Geographic, and so I thought, I'm gonna have to try to win this contest. So I focused. I won the contest, and now I have a staff job for 3 months at the magazine, and they hadn't hired a new photographer in 11 years. And so the chances were like, when people say, what are you going to do after Geographic? It's like, no, I want to work here. And, one of the turning points was when I was working there was an editor, Bill Dothett, and he said to me, there's 30,000 working photographers in New York. Any one of them is good enough to work at National Geographic. But what separates the people that are good enough to work here is they have their own ideas. Mm-hmm. And he said, you should think like a writer, come up with your own ideas. And I did. I was interested in photography to make a difference. There was a part of a school of photography called the Concerned Photographers, like Eugene Smith did Minamata, Country Doctor. There's Robert Capa, people showing man's inhumanity to man with photographs. And, the conceit was that if you can show people what's going on, inform them, then they can make informed choices. So it wasn't just I wasn't interested in taking like traditional geographic pictures that were just about beauty or travel logs. I wanted to use photography to change the world. So I was upstairs at the lunchroom with this guy Bill Doffett, and we were talking, and he had a wicked sense of humor. And he come up with like stories for National Geographic, like, well, to set it up, National Geographic back then had these relentless, optimistic stories. They could go to Uganda, which was doing a civil war, and make it look like a nice place to live. They really, systematically avoided the negative parts. Yeah. And so he would come up with stories like, Our Friend the Maggot, Life Goes On Inside a Corpse, or, there was a story about a couple walking across America, like to find the real America. And we'd be like, bulldozer across America. And we think of all the ideas that we could, what you would do to do the cliches of if you were a National Geographic photographer. Yeah. And one day we were up at the lunchroom and we were watching somebody haul the garbage across the, at the lunchroom, hauling the garbage off to the, wherever they take the garbage. And he says to me, he said, "Oh, you could do like a story on garbage for National Geographic, propose that." And I said, "Oh, I was just reading about this guy, William Rathje, a professor at the University of Arizona that studies garbage. He's a garbologist. He uses the same techniques as anthropologists to study modern garbage." And I said, "Oh yeah, we could do like, they always do like, these guys that do the commodity stories for Geographic, they always have like, gold as art or rubies and art. Yeah. And we could do like a garbologist." And he said, "Well, I was just reading about these guys up in Northern California that use garbage art." And we did a couple of these sort of riffs, and I started thinking, what, this could be an actual story. And I proposed it. I called it Urban Ore, because back then there was only one mandatory recycling program in all of America. And to me, the idea that you're throwing out these, not precious metals, but aluminum cans were like not being recycled as a matter of law or of course, I proposed it and they accepted it. And then I became the first new photographer that Geographic hired in about 11 years. But then it occurred to me, I had to make garbage interesting, so I was going all around the world staying at, 5-star hotels, but I'd be like, come back stinking like garbage, I hadn't been out of a 3-state area when I was a kid. Back when I was working for that newspaper, I hadn't been out of, the other 2 states that I've been to 3 states. The other 2 I could see from my window. So I wasn't very well traveled. But then when I started working for Geographic, all of a sudden I'm on this whirlwind. But, the idea was to get people interested in recycling. And that story in my memory became the most popular story of the year by readership surveys. They hired me under contract. And then, but was interesting. They had like an incredible influx of letters to, people were interested in this. It was, Geographic was huge back then. They had 11 million subscribers. 4 people saw each magazine that came out. So it was a 4-person pass around. So it'd be at a doctor's office, a family of 4. So 44 million people saw the magazine every month in the United States. It was mainly an American magazine at that point. But then recycling started to take off, not just because of the article, but because of, there's some really good science that I found out later on that shows that once you reach 10% of the population with 100% committed to an idea, that's the recipe, that's the formula for social change. I didn't know that back then, but now it started to make sense, because you could start a water cooler conversation with a magazine article. It's harder to do now because we're so fractured, but that was one of the most popular subscription magazines in the world back then. So it was very powerful. But I started doing these sort of social change articles. There's a story on the Powder River Basin in Wyoming where the ranchers were selling their ranches for coal. And but then what happened was Geographic said, "Oh, this guy can make topical stories really interesting. And then I got, I was so excited to work for Geographic, and it was a wonderful experience, but I lost, I wasn't doing the stories that really mattered to me. I was working for the magazine that I loved, but, I was diverting from this idea of the concerned photographer. And I was like, then, I was making, pretty decent money for me, but then you have a family and all this, and then your priorities change. Yeah. And, but I was really unhappy, like kind of miserable, like with the best job in the world. Yeah. And, now I know why I was miserable, and it wasn't just, the loneliness of being on the road. It sounds really exotic, and it was, it's beautiful, but like when you're, enjoying beautiful places and you're by yourself, or you're with somebody that you're only, for a short while, these sort of ephemeral relationships weren't enough to feed me. And I know now I know that, and we can get into this later, but it's, the last film that I just worked on that's just coming out. It just came out last week at Tribeca. It's called Mission Joy. It's with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. We had two of the greatest spiritual leaders of our generation together, and we asked them the big questions. And then things that actually started to click into place for me when I made that film was like, the one thing that they say is the only thing that really makes us happy is when we're in service to other people, when you're helping other people. And, and that sort of that dark area of National Geographic where I was doing stories that really were, they were game changing, I think, for myself and the magazine, but they weren't, fulfilling me. Like it was like I was a really good, I don't know, session musician, but I wasn't like doing the, I wasn't creating the art that I wanted to do. I wasn't doing the songs I wanted to do. And now certainly with films, I made that transition. But the way I transitioned from photography to film was after Geographic, I was working for Fortune magazine. I did a lot of their covers. I was photographing people that made too much money for a living. I mean, Bill Gates, Larry Ellison, Steve Jobs. At one point I photographed 7 of the top 10 richest people in the world. But I had done a story for National Geographic on the information revolution back in, I think we started in 1993. This is like just at the beginning of the internet era. Yeah. And the sort of the Steve Jobs or the Bill Gates of that era was Jim Clark. Jim Clark had started Netscape, the first commercial internet browser with Netscape. And we wanted to film him, but he was too busy. He was off, building his business, and he couldn't be bothered by a National Geographic writer and photographer. So he was always on my list of somebody I wanted to meet because he's this incredible thinker. When he was in college, he helped send man to the moon. When John F. Kennedy called to put an American on the moon by the end of the decade, he was working for Boeing on the night shift in the computer room, and he knew that the bottleneck was at his department, and so he sped up the computers by 20-fold to make it happen. That's just, he's doing that in college. He started the first, what was it called? The first 3D graphics engine, the first way that you could design anything in 3D and do games in 3D in real time. It used to be you would draw a line and then you'd have to go get a cup of coffee and then the computer would make it. But he sped these, this whole process up by like orders of magnitude, made it, so in an automobile to be redesigned, it used to take like 4 years. Now it could be done in a few months. This is Jim. Yeah. And then I was working for Fortune magazine, and he had just started WebMD, and I was sent off to Amsterdam, where he was building a boat with the world's tallest mast. And I went up to, they put the stick in the mast, and I'm scared of heights. My dad died from a fall. And I went up to the top of the mast and came down the forestay, and then he was up there, on the 5th spreader, smoking a cohiba, and looking down on the boat. And we went out to dinner that night, and I found out that we're both divers. He loved to dive, and he was starting a new company called Shutterfly. And this is a way that you can take digital photographs and then you send them off, and they send the actual physical print back to you. Yeah. And he said, Louie, would you teach me how to be a good photographer? And he started $3 billion companies from scratch, whole industries. And I said to Jim, I'll teach you how to be a great photographer if you teach me how to be a billionaire. And And so that started the beginning of this relationship where, really I was doing a book on his boat, and I was teaching him photography, but it was a start of a beautiful friendship. He loved to dive, and I loved to dive, and he picked me up on his plane, and we go sailing around the world to some of the best dive sites. And Jim is one of these guys that is just not at all satisfied with like the status quo, like the best underwater photography cameras even now aren't that good. And he's like, these cameras suck. I said, well, Jim, nobody can put a view camera in a housing. It's just too expensive and too laborious. And he said, so he built one. He built two of them. And so we still have the best underwater camera ever made. He built that. Yeah. And because what happened was, well, we're losing the coral reefs very quickly. In the last 4 years, I mean, the Great Barrier Reef, I think we've lost half of that in the last 4 years, maybe That's more. Right. They're disappearing. This is going on all over the world as the oceans become more acidic, as they're heating up. A 2-degree difference of temperature in the oceans can basically dissolve the reefs. And that's what's happening. And he saw this. He said, let's go document the reefs before we lose them. And if you're not a diver, well, to me as a diver, when you put your head underwater, it's like an alien universe. And it's so beautiful. It's so gorgeous. And the idea that we're losing this, in one generation was pretty, petrifying to Jim and myself. He took me, he says, Louie, I'm going to take you to the best reef I've ever been to. And we went to Papua New Guinea. It takes 17 hours to fly to Papua New Guinea. The boat's waiting. You sail another day and a half, and he dives in on the coordinates that he had been to like 10 years before. And he comes up, and he's almost in tears. He says, "It's gone. The reef is gone." I said, "No, it must be the wrong coordinates." He says, "No, this is it." But we don't know if it was dynamite fishing or one of these bleaching incidents, but the reef was gone. And and every time we went back, we were diving for several years, and every time we came back to a spot, you could see this degradation go on before your eyes. There'd be less fish. And we came up from a dive in an island near the Galapagos and in Cocos Islands, and we're surrounded by fishermen illegally fishing in a marine sanctuary. And he said to me, somebody should do something about this. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how about you and I? He said, what do you mean? I said, we'll use your money and my eye, and we'll make films. And he was really flush from selling Netscape. A couple $1 billion he made, like 4 or something. And so he had money to give away to nonprofits. So he started this organization for me called the Oceanic Preservation Society. The idea we're going to make films. Yeah. And I thought, oh man, I was so excited to start. I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I was intimidated by the challenge, but now I had a buddy and a mission, right? The only thing is I'd never made a film before. And, and in the interim of this period, Jim had built this other boat. It's the world's largest private sailboat called Athena. It's like 300 feet long. And I'm on vacation, over Christmas vacation with my family's on the boat, his family's on the boat. And my son starts playing on the beach with another kid. This is down in St. Bart's, happens to be Steven Spielberg's kids. Now, Steven Spielberg had done Jurassic Park on Jim's computers. And, he comes over the boat to meet Jim. And the father of his son's new friend. And when I have him alone for a few seconds, I said, Mr. Spielberg, do you have any advice for a first-time filmmaker? And he says, yes, never make a movie involving boats or animals. Now remember, I'm about to start the Oceanic Preservation Society. But, the first film we did was The Cove, and The Cove became the most winning documentary in history. It, about 75 awards from Sundance to Academy Award, first film in history, first documentary in history to sweep all the film guilds. And, but it wasn't just that, so when young people ask me, do you have any advice? I said, yeah, don't listen to any advice. But I think it was we never started out that film to think. I didn't even know there were so many film awards, but that wasn't the objective. That was the collateral. We wanted to solve this problem. The idea. Jim tasked me, okay, let's try to make a difference with the oceans. Yeah, and we started doing actually our second film, Racing Extinction, a film about the Anthropocene, the sixth mass extinction on the planet. And I got pretty quickly overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I'm like over my head. And then I was at one of these marine mammal conferences, and Rick O'Barry was supposed to speak. I was just going around to conferences trying to figure out what are the stories that we concentrate on that are current. And I was at a marine mammal conference down in San Diego in California. And Rick O'Barry, the guy that captured and trained the 5 female dolphins that collectively played the part of Flipper, was supposed to be speaking on video night on a Saturday night. And I thought, after like a week-long poster sessions of doctors, like PhDs talking about their like little limited part of expertise of the ocean, I was like, oh, finally somebody from popular culture, And then at the last minute, they wouldn't allow him to talk. And I asked why, and it turns out that he's going to talk about Taiji, Japan, which is where they killed more dolphins on the planet than any other place. And they wouldn't allow him to talk because the Hubs Research Institute, the nonprofit arm of SeaWorld, sponsored the event that I was at. So I called up Rick and asked him, found out all this. And he says, well, I'm actually going to Taiji next week. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, but you go, I'll catch up. And I took a 3-day crash course on how to make a film. And I caught up to him in Taiji. And that's kind of the beginning of, OPS more or less, is that we started, we went to Taiji. We found out there's a cove there that was really difficult to get into. Journalists hadn't been able to get into it ever. And I didn't want to get in. I didn't want to see what went on in there. I just wanted to get to me, it was just going to be one part of this bigger story on the oceans. And then I had this epiphany, William Blake said, to see the world in a grain of sand, that you can see so much when you just concentrate on one aspect. And one person, sometimes that's the way that you can get into a story that's much bigger. And Rick O'Barry, to me, was a way, if we could get into the Cove and tell his story, that you could see this, you could see what we're doing to the oceans. You could see what we're doing to our counterparts in the ocean, the dolphins, but we couldn't get in there. And then the second, epiphany I had is when we were trying to sneak into the Cove just to see what it looked like, the lay of the land. We're at this place called Tsunami Park, looking down on it, and we were sneaking around because it was illegal to be in there while they were catching dolphins. Yeah. And I thought, man, this is so exciting. And then I thought, man, this could be like, if we document this could be really the exciting part of the film. And then it became this thriller, this James Bond thriller. Was trying to put together these pieces of how do you break into the Cove and not get caught. And so we had these fake rocks that we hid cameras in. We had,
they were awesome.
Back then we were using drones, but they were gasoline powered. This is only 12 years ago, right? 13 years ago.
Oh, we're moving so quick.
Yeah, things changed really quick. I mean, this drone would take your head off. I mean, it was no joke. This thing was like, it was a beast. But anyway, that film, became sort of a hybrid. It felt like a thriller. Rolling Stone magazine here in the States said it was like a cross between Born Identity and Flipper. And
I saw that. Awesome.
Yeah, we sort of had like a genre, I guess, for a while in Racing Extinction. We did something kind of similar. It felt like a thriller too. And, part of that comes from this idea that, documentaries to me can usually be kind of boring or they're preachy. And if you can make it like a thriller, blend some of the narrative techniques that you do with popular films into a documentary, then people are interested, right? And that's half the battle. 90% of the battle really is getting people excited about something. So, but that's what I did at Geographic. I took really hard stories that were kind of hard to conceive. Like, how do you do a story on the sense of smell? And the managing editor back then said, well, we can't do it, forget it. And I said, just give me 6 months, which back then wasn't a lot of time. And that became the most popular story in the magazine's history at that point. Wow. I would love the challenge of taking difficult stories and trying to make them interesting. That was kind of if I had a shtick, that was it. Like, okay, give me your, your feeble, your, the disenfranchised. I'll show you that it's really, to me, there's no bad subjects, just sort of weak thinking photographers. You can make anything exciting and beautiful. But what I was looking for was something that had like an intrinsic meaning to it. And with film, that's where it came out. It felt so satisfying to do a film that not only, the words were like the collateral. Like I said, I didn't even know they existed. We were trying to stop this issue. Now, back when we were doing that film, they were killing 23,000 dolphins and porpoises every year in Japan for human consumption. The last year that I remember them killing dolphins, I think it was down to like 1,610, and I think it's like it's way over a 90% decline in dolphin deaths because of the activism around that film. Other organizations also working on that, but it wasn't just creating the awareness. Is like then we worked on campaigns to try to stop it, and it wasn't just in the West we always look at like, well, how could you kill a dolphin? And the Japanese whalers would go like, well, you in the West you guys kill cows, pigs, and chickens, and pigs are pretty smart. And you know what? They're right. They're absolutely right. It's just
it's the same. It is the same. Going back to the Cove, there were so many parts in the documentary where we thought you are all in real trouble. How risky was it filming in Taiji? It felt really exciting on our side, but how risky was it? Yeah.
Like you said, it was very much like a Bourne movie. So.
Oh, it was way more exciting and dangerous than we captured on film. I remember there's an Australian surfer, David Rostovich, that's in the film. Yep. Love this guy. And I had told my wife at the time, I said, I'm never going to go back to Taiji. And I went up to the International Whaling Convention, which was up at Anchorage at that point. And for the Cove, I always wanted to find somebody that was rescued by a dolphin. And I found this 90-year-old woman, and her we interviewed her, but her recollection was really hazy, and it sounded really dubious. And then I was listening to a talk that David Rostovich was doing up there, and I thought, oh, this is cool. It's a great story. Surfer being saved from a shark attack in Australia by a dolphin. The dolphin went and T-boned the shark that was coming right at him, and it's a wonderful story. And I'm interviewing him, and he says, "Oh, have you ever heard of Taiji?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I just been there." And he says, "Well, I want to go there and do a protest." And I thought, "Oh, this guy's going to get so busted." So I, went back on my word, and we started we went back to Taiji to help him get into the Cove. Mm-hmm. And I remember he wanted to go in while they were killing dolphins. He went in right after they killed him. The Cove is all covered with blood, and we had that in Taiji sussed like a military operation. We knew how long it took the cops to get from Shenzhou, the town just south of there, and so we had 17 minutes to get in and out. We called it. We had radios from the surfers and us, but we had this helicopter up at Taiji Park, right? At Tsunami Park. And so Rostovich takes off with his crew, the surfers, and there's one coastal road that goes out of town. It goes from, Taiji to Osaka or the other way up the other coast, but it's one road. And I'm hiding out in an alley to get my helicopter crew because I've got this helicopter I don't want to lose, right? It's like $11,000 helicopter, the drone. And so I'm hiding. You see the cops' cars go piling by, and I thought, okay, we got out of there, and we stop at a restaurant, about just a couple miles out. It was like 20 miles outside of Taiji, and I get a call from Rostovich, and I said, "How you doing, man?" He says, "Oh, I'm good, but I can count 33 cops, 7 squad cars, and a prison van." I said, "You okay?" He says, "Oh, I'm okay. They're looking for you."
Exactly.
And I thought, what the hell are we going to do? There's one road out of town, and we got on a map, on a topo map, and we found out there's a hydroelectric dam repair road that went through the spine of the country, and it was really hairy on this. We had a van, and that's how we snuck out of the prefecture, and we got out of there. But there was like times like we don't have cameras rolling all the time. I was with a buddy, and we're all in camouflage. We're up at that same park, and we're hauling our gear out. And the fisherman comes, and all the fishermen have these big long knives that they use to kill the dolphins that are in their belts. And this guy comes up looking in the park for somebody, and I thought, okay, we could get busted then, and we're just camouflage, and he walks right by us. But we're all the bags are like in duffel bags full of like not just camo, but they had like our camouflage had actual leaves on it, fake leaves. So, it was like the same stuff that they used for the Navy SEALs. But the first day that we went in the Cove, it was they caught a bunch of pilot whales. Pilot whales are just big dolphins. They're huge. They're like, I don't know, 1,000 pounds or more, probably 1,500 pounds. Yeah. And we'd been up for a couple days, like plotting the first mission, and Rick was there. And Rick says, "Oh, they never killed the dolphins on the same day. They'll wait till the next day. But the next day was Sunday. They never kill them on a Sunday, so they'll probably wait till Monday. They'll probably keep them in the Cove." So we set the cameras as just sort of a test trip. And so I'm in camouflage. My crew goes back off to sleep. We've been up for about 48 hours at this point. They set the cameras in the Cove, and I climb up to this little ledge on the other side of the Cove, up above, like through the treetops, so I could see what's going on. And we're just thinking, well, let's see what it looks like. These were the first hard drive cameras ever made. Mm-hmm. These were prototypes. So the first version of a camera that Sony ever had, we had them, and they were only like 30, I think, gigabyte hard drives. And so we had these battery packs in there. So we had these fake rocks with cameras inside and batteries we had to like make these batteries that almost look like dynamite. If you open up the rocks, it looked like they were wrapped in tape, and it was like these red batteries with it's like it could last 4 hours. And so we had these, and back then there wasn't even a way to edit the hard drives, right? There wasn't even there wasn't a way to get the information from the hard drives to anything you could edit with. We had to wait like another year till they actually devised the way to do it. So anyway, sorry, there's garbage trucks backing up here. But anyway, so the long story short, so I'm in the Cove, hanging out, and they're not supposed to kill him that day, but I'm sort of seeing the lay of the land. Like 5:36 in the morning, 2 boats come out from the town of Taiji with fishermen, like 3 fishermen in each boat, and they get out and they start shining flashlights around, and they're looking for people like me. I realize, and then the group that comes off on my side, they disappear for like 5 minutes, and they come out. I can hear this commotion on above me, and there's a woman screaming. It almost sounds like she's getting raped, and I didn't know what happened. But it's like the fear is palpable, and I've been with these, looking at these pilot whales in the Cove, and the adults are swimming in a circle, protective around their babies, and so the screaming has gone on. They start corralling these dolphins with their motorboats, pushing with the noise and propellers into the secret Cove, and they start killing them. And then I know I'm scared to death, but somebody comes along with a flashlight, and they're shining it up towards me, and I'm realizing that he's in the light, but I'm in the dark, and so his eyes couldn't adjust, I guess. But the light goes right by me. So anyway, so this goes on, and I'm hanging from a rope on this ledge. And I realized I was there like 15 and a half hours before, because it's a national park, and I realized if I show up in this natural park, coming out with all this camouflage, black face paint, we'll end up in jail. So I had to wait till dark the next day, and to get picked up by the crew. And then when we looked at this footage, because we could look at it, we just couldn't edit it. We thought, oh my God, look what they're doing to these dolphins. And then that fear that came through is like, oh my God, they're really doing something unconscionable. And if we get this footage out there, we might be able to stop this. Yeah. And that was, the first day in the Cove, really. But we had tried to do the story like journalists. We wanted to get their side of the story, but I didn't even want to get into the Cove. The idea was like just get their point of view, but they wouldn't talk to us, and that's when we realized that we had to. We didn't have to, but I wanted to find out what was going on in there. Why were they so protective?
So
that they wouldn't even want to talk about it.
For the people that don't know about Taiji, what makes the dolphins so desirable? Why are they catching them and hunting them, and why are they killing them in such high numbers?
Several reasons. They say it's pest control. The Japanese fishermen say, well, their dolphins are eating their fish. When that's not the problem. Overfishing is the problem. Yeah. And they're capturing them these days mostly for the captive dolphin trade. A lot of them, I think there's over 50 dolphinariums in Japan. A lot of them are being exported to China because in the West, dolphinariums are disappearing. We've got not just because of the Cove, but because of another film called Blackfish. People in the West are starting to abandon taking, kids to dolphinariums. Rick told me, he said, when you watch a dolphin show, it looks like entertainment, but what you're really watching is a spectacle of dominance.
Yeah.
The dolphins are really smart, incredibly smart. They're fairly easy to train. And when you're withholding food, which is what they do, they give them drugs to, to reduce their stress. And they basically, if they're not performing, they do food deprivation. Then that's how they get them to cooperate. But once that's going on, you look at the show completely differently. And
absolutely.
Rick was always saying, like, he spent 35 years trying to tear that down, that business down after 10 years of trying to build it up, and now it's been another 10 years. And but that's, in short, that's what they're doing. They're doing. The real profit motive is the captive dolphin industry, because you'd make about $150,000 for a well-trained dolphin, but you can only make about $600 from a dolphin when you sell it for its meat. Of course, the meat is toxic. Every bit of dolphin meat that's been tested in the last 30 years has anywhere between 5 and 5,000 times more mercury than would be allowed if it was a fish. Of course, they're mammals. And what's crazy is, this is insanity to me, is that you can go on to the Japanese Ministry of Health site and they have recommendations for how much dolphin a pregnant woman should eat. This is like how much poison is enough, and mercury. There's a lot of mercury in dolphin meat. Mercury is the most toxic non-radioactive element in the world. There's no reason it should be in your body. You certainly don't want it in in an infant or a fetus, because it has the most deleterious effects on the developing brain. It starts to dissolve the neurons. It starts to dissolve, the connections that you have in your brain that makes you human. It takes away your sense of smell, your sense of touch, your vision, your memory. Everything starts to disappear. And the worse you have it, obviously, the worse the disease is. And so in Japanese culture, we don't, when we talk to the Japanese press, we don't talk about, hey, there's more sentient, intelligent, blah, blah, blah. We talk about mercury because, Eugene Smith, one of the photographers I talked about earlier, the concerned photographer, did a seminal story on Minamata, which is where they had the first big industrial accident of mercury intentionally being put in the bay and poisoning children and the residents of Minamata Bay. So it resonates very deeply. So, that's one reason I think the film's been so effective in terms of helping stop the killing of dolphins is, that mercury connection.
You were tested
Absolutely.
with high levels of mercury, yes, just after the Cove?
Yeah. It's I went to a slaughterhouse in 1986 when I was working for Fortune magazine, and I was doing a story on the biggest independently owned cattle ranches in America. And one of these cattle ranches was so big in Oklahoma that they had their own slaughterhouse. And I had never been to a slaughterhouse before. And they killed the animals. They put this captive bolt into their brain. It's like a pneumatic drill, or not a drill, like a I don't know, a pen.
It's a bit like a nail gun.
But it's big, and it presses the brain and is supposed to kill them instantly. And then they turn the animals upside down, and they take off they peel off their hide, and now they're going around on a conveyor belt instead of like a car where they're adding to it. They're taking pieces away, and everybody has a station where they're taking off pieces of it. And this, intrinsically that this is what goes on in a slaughterhouse, but when you see it, it's quite different. But there was this one cow that the bolt had missed, or it didn't kill him, so it's hanging upside down without its skin, and it's looking at me as it's going around on this conveyor belt. Its head's just looking at me, and I'm thinking that the thing's still alive. It's still conscious. And I thought, I can't be party to this anymore. So in my mind, I said, okay, I'm gonna stop eating land animals, but I'll eat fish because fish are more or less sentient, right? They can feel less too. And
yeah, and I think we've been told that quite a lot. I certainly was in my upbringing was told that it's all right. Fish don't have feelings. Fish can't, they literally can't feel things and stuff like that. And we were told that a lot growing up. And it's only more recently that the truth has come out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I thought I was eating. I mean, certainly, it's easier when you abandon meat to be more sensitive towards the animal rights part of it. When you start to realize, okay, I don't need it, then you can open yourself up to all the suffering that's going on. But at that point, I'm ashamed to say I was doing it for health reasons. I was doing it for animal rights reasons, but I was thinking, that I'll do it for, it'll be healthier and I don't have to, eat animals because I've seen this suffering that goes on, and delusional about the suffering of fish. So I'll give you that. So I'm, when we're doing the Cove, one of the last things that we do when we leave the country is that we had the car ready to go to the airport, and I had the one last interview with Hideki Morinuki, the Deputy Minister of Fisheries. And we went to the Ministry of Fisheries, and we're there. And there's two ways you can test for mercury: by blood or by hair. The heavy metals accumulate in your hair. So we had the footage there on these and on our iPhones, and I showed him the footage of the Cove. Well, what happened was I did a hair sample of them first. And so I said, well, the dolphins don't have, you eat dolphins, there's not a lot of, you don't think mercury's a problem, can we test your hair? So we took a clip of his hair. And then I showed him a clip of, what was going on in the Cove. And you can see in the film, you can see his reaction to it. And he said, where and when did you get this? Because he was saying that they kill him in a different way. They kill him instantly. And if you see the film, completely different. Yeah. So anyway, we had his hair, and we were going to have his hair analyzed. And I thought, well, I eat a lot of fish. I'm a pescatarian. And, I got to say, when I was in Japan, I was like, I didn't mind eating fish for, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was eating a lot of it. My son still is a professional fisherman. And I would have freezers full of fish. He would, had 300 pounds of tuna brought up, and I'd have a freezer down in the basement. And I'd have I thought my brain, I was eating healthy, and then I thought, well, I would get my hair tested too, for mercury, and the lab comes back, and the scientist, says, well, your man in Japan, he has 8 times higher levels than what's considered too high. And he says, but this other sample, whose is that? And I said, that's mine. He says, well, yours is 44 times higher. Wow. And I realized, the shock that went through me, because I went to Minamata and I saw I was talking to the lead researcher that was studying, the effects of mercury in Minamata. And he showed me the brains and saw what was happening. It was like, it basically makes the brain into Swiss cheese. You can see the holes being etched out from the synapses, being killed. And I realized that I had to stop eating fish, and I was just like, scared to death. And then I'm down in LA for the Academy Awards, and I find myself at lunch with this woman, Rebecca Mink, a designer, and we're at lunch, and she's vegan. And I said, and I was at this point just a vegetarian. I said, what do you eat? And she goes, everything else. All protein originates in plants, and that's where the animals that eat meat, they get it from the animals that eat the plants. You're just eating the middleman. And then I started to have this epiphany of like, okay, you can survive by being plant based, and that was kind of my transition. But it was really, first it was really animal rights, and then health, and then it's easy to come back to animal rights after you realize you don't need it. You don't need to eat this way to be human, to thrive, actually.
Yeah. Did you also find that, and this is kind of going slightly off topic, did you also find that your energy increased moving to a plant-based diet? Because that's one thing, both of us are vegan. One thing we found is that we felt that we had an increase in energy.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, in that film we haven't talked about yet, but Game Changers, you look at athletes after they have one meat-based meal and one vegetarian meal, comparing the blood samples from one day to the next. It's basically like this, we have this, it looks like this children's glue is what it looks like, like all the fat and the inflammatory molecules that are in meat is in your blood, and it goes to your brain, obviously. And yeah, I mean, all the athletes, I'm not an athlete. I used to be when I was, in high school and college, but like not at a professional level. But the professionals, they say, like, there's one guy that was a captain of one of the soccer teams over in Europe, and he said, like, after he went vegan, he's the captain of the team, and he said after he went vegan, well, when he was eating meat, it took him at least a day or two to recover. And he said after he went vegan, he felt like he could play another game, and he has more time for his children. He has more energy for his children, and it clears up your thinking. I mean, I certainly have, the people on my crew that are, let's say, eat meat. I can just see it. They just, they start to tank after several hours, and I can go 12 or 14. I probably don't need to sleep as much as everybody else. I mean, it's hard to compare, like when it's a slow transition, it's not like overnight you notice it. But certainly the athletes that are really in top shape, they swear by it, and they see it as a competitive edge, because you can the secret to becoming a top athlete is being able to break your body down and have it recover quickly, so you can break it down again. And if your body's always in a state of inflammation from eating meat, because every meal you eat with animal products, it takes about 6 hours, 8 hours for your body to clean out. And as soon as you do, then you have another meal. And of course, by the time you wake up and you're doing it again, your body's in a constant state of inflammation. And at my age, I'm in my 60s now, I want to, I just want to live long. I love what I'm doing. I love my life. I love my kids. I want to see grandkids. I want to experience as much of this as possible. This is not suffering to me. And so, but if you look at the places where people do live the longest without chronic disease, it's in the so-called blue zones, places, where, there's 5 known blue zones in the world. There's Ikaria in Greece is called the island where people forget to die. Or, and Okinawa, it's what they call it, the land of the immortals. And Sardinia, where they first discovered the first blue zone, there was a population of people, centenarians, over 100 years old. Like they had like 20 times more than would statistically be probable. And they thought these people must be lying. The researchers thought, and they went there and they started analyzing, what are these people eating? And it turns out that, most of their diet is plant-based, like, 95% of it, I think, the blue zones come from a whole foods, plant-based diet. And of course, there's other principles to it. It's not just food. It's, obviously putting the right fuel in the tank is important, but, they're also, they don't do exercise, like intentional exercise. They're not on Pelotons. They're in the garden. They're walking. They don't have cars. They're not driving. They have a strong community bond, so they always have a sense of purpose. They're relaxing. They're doing, maybe if they're faith-based, they take time off to relax. The Sabbath, or the Japanese have their own versions of that. Meditation. So if you can, dial in these, there's 9 principles of the blue zones, but the one that I focus on is on food, because, to me, it's like food is at the nexus of almost all the problems that we have with climate change, freshwater pollution, almost everything comes down to health. 80 to 85% of the chronic diseases that we have can be reversed by those 4 principles. I'm working right now with Dr. Dean Ornish on a film, and he's a researcher that first proved that you could reverse heart disease. Back 44 years ago, before he did his first study, people thought the only way to reverse heart disease is through surgery or drugs. That was it. And the idea that you could reverse diseases through medicine, that's like preventative medicine was like, it was a heresy. And he proved that they proved that they could do it on animals, but people didn't think it would work on people, because this dogma is so deep in our culture that you need meat to be strong, have endurance and virility, when it's absolutely the opposite. And so he proved that, and he proved it with heart disease. He did it with diabetes, and now he's doing it with Alzheimer's. There's no known cure for Alzheimer's. There's a drug that was just approved in the United States. It costs I think it's like $56,000. Is it a month or a year? Anyways, it has to be done intravenously. A third of the patients have brain swelling or hemorrhaging. A third, and it only slows down the disease, between 3 and 18 months. So in other words, it doesn't reverse it, but I know I'm probably speaking out of turn, but it looks right now with early stage patients adjusting to, that have a preventative program of whole food, plant-based diet, exercise, group support, and meditation, you can reverse it. It looks like, it's too early to say definitively. There's only about a 25% of the way through 100 people in the cohort, but it looks like it's a lot of people said, that they surmised that it could happen, but he's getting the results that it actually looks like it could be working. So, yeah,
absolutely. We're lucky enough to be interviewing Dr. Michael Greger shortly as well. And we, as part of that one, we've been vegan for quite a while. All of our kids are vegan and everything else like that. But we wanted to understand more, and so we looked into some of his, and we read the book How Not to Die and things like that. And it just keeps going systematically through stage by stage. So that would be good for you instead of doing the drugs. That would be good for you instead of doing drugs. And a lot of the time, the trials and that they've had with the drugs have proven to do very, very minimal for what they're aimed at, but have all these side effects. Whereas sometimes having a plant-based diet will help that and give you better side effects. Just general benefits across the board. So we're looking forward to that. He's a very knowledgeable man.
Yeah, I've interviewed him for this a current story I'm working on calling it Food 2.0.
So that was Louie Psihoyos. Obviously, that's not the end of the interview. We had such a long conversation that we thought it was going to be better to split it into 2 parts, roughly an hour each episode. So the next episode will be out next week. And just thinking back on this one, I was just so, fascinated by his life story, how he got to where he is, how motivated he was, certainly in the photography side of things, to be looking at real change, real social change, real action. He wanted not just a beautiful, typical picture that was on National Geographic, but he wanted to show what's happening in the world. And it looked like that was almost started the catalyst for where his whole life and trajectory has gone.
Indeed, we could listen to him for hours.
We did.
But I think we kept him for so long that he was probably late for his following meeting. An absolutely amazing story of his life and achievements. I'm not sure if we've mentioned through the podcast, but the Cove has helped an absolute lot in terms of the taiji hunts. Yeah. They've reduced massively. Also, the Cove has earned an Academy Award, plus another, I think, 75 awards throughout the globe. An amazing documentary. If you haven't seen it, please do. And we'll continue with the rest of the interview the following week.
Absolutely. So, as usual, if you want to get in touch with us, we've got our emails. We've got Gareth at howtobegood.com.au and Anchor at howtobegood.com.au. Send us an email. We read them all. It's great to hear from you. It's great to hear your ideas, your thoughts, and it's just nice understanding where you want us to go and what you want us to talk about and who you want us to talk to. We've also got the Patreon page if you want to help out, pay for a coffee or whatever it might be. Failing that, we'll see you next week. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.